We are supposed to be the good guys.
We are.
Full spoilers for Across the Spider-Verse and Guardians 3. So Across the Spider-Verse is out and oh boy, 2 fantastic comic book movies in a row? What is this, 2017? After getting a bevy of mixed offerings, 2023 has finally brought some truly top-notch cape shit with Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 and Across the Spider-Verse. James Gunn recently said in a GQ video that Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse was one of his favourite comic book movies of all time.
My favorite superhero movie and my favorite comic book movie is an animated film. It's Into the Spider-Verse.
That sparked a thought in me, because I think the way in which both creative teams approach the Guardians series and the Spider-Verse series is very similar, and in a way most comic book series don't really do anymore. In fact, with Fast 10 having just dropped and Mission Impossible 7 and Expendables 4 around the corner, it's kind of something even most action movies don't do anymore. I've seen loads of chatter comparing Across the Spider-Verse to The Matrix Reloaded, and that makes so much sense, even more so than the studio's Empire comparisons, because Across the Spider-Verse is truly half a movie, set up for the finale due in March, but it's also the middle episode of one 3-act story. Through some clever plotting and character development, it's taken what seemed like a fully standalone first movie and turned it into the first part building to a satisfying climax. Sounds sexy, Spider-Man. Why did I write that? But yeah, what's so good about Spider-Verse is that in spite of referencing pretty much every Spider-Man ever, it somehow never loses sight of its main character and what it means for the movie to be the second chapter for him. It feels like we're approaching a proper conclusion and we're only on part 2, which doesn't really feel like a thing these days. The MCU, for better or worse, has created a race amongst Hollywood blockbusters to have as many actors signed on for as many movies as possible, attempting to weave cinematic tapestries full of crossover characters and stories. Many fail, and maybe that's why in this instance Sony had the foresight to cap off this story rather than launching a million different spin-offs in the interim. We didn't get a solo Miles movie, a solo Gwen movie, a solo Spider-Man 2099 movie, or a solo Peter B. Parker movie. Instead, we just got Spider-Verse 2, led by Miles, but catching us up on everyone and everything. A glorious melting pot of spider totems coming together to create a sequel that feels essential because it's only one of 3 rather than one of 30.
Everyone else who died in the past stayed dead, not her. Why? Was it the magic cliff? I don't know.
James Gunn made 3 good to great movies in Guardians Volumes 1, 2 and 3, but try as he might to make them feel like a cohesive trilogy, it can't escape its larger universe like Spider-Verse can. Paradoxically, Gunn's attempts to keep it more standalone than other MCU air quotes trilogies is exactly what ends up hampering the third installment from getting that perfect trio of movies cohesive. How and why has Spider-Verse managed what the Guardians could not?
Nah, I'ma do my own thing.
Did you like Spider-Verse? Where do you think the cliffhanger ending will leave us in part 3? Is it a better movie than the original? Let me know in the comments below, and if you like this video, why not check out my smorgasbord, what a word, smorgasbord of other Marvel videos.
Nah.
But before I jump into all that, I want to talk about today's sponsor, Ridge. Ridge very kindly sent me a couple of their products to test out, including the Ridge key case and Ridge wallet. You've no doubt got a wallet or keyring and you might be thinking, why do I need Ridge? Well, Ridge has upgraded these products from top to bottom, making them easier to use, more compact, and in my opinion, way cooler. Look at these things. Carbon fibre? Are you kidding me? The Ridge wallet expands to hold up to 12 cards, plus room for cash, while remaining as slim as possible. Optional AirTag attachments mean that you never have to lose your wallet again. They come in 30 colours and styles, including carbon fibre, burnt titanium, and forged ember. Oh, the key case can securely hold up to 6 keys, keeping them firmly in place without jingling about. The key case will still ensure you can quickly and easily pull out any key you want. Very handy. With over 3 million customers and over 50,000 5-star reviews, the Ridge team is so confident you'll like it that they'll let you test drive it for 99 days. You can send it back for a full refund if you don't love it. Get yours in time for the Father's Day sale. Find the best Father's Day gift using my link ridge.com/fullfat, and right now you can save up to 40% off through June 15th. That's ridge.com/fullfat.
It should be simple enough.
There's actually not a lot of true superhero trilogies. Raimi's Spider-Man kinda had one, but the third movie wasn't a true finale, a fourth movie was supposed to continue the story, and now there's an essential fourth story for the character in No Way Home. X-Men certainly isn't a trilogy, neither is anything related to Superman. There's a bunch of cinematic universes, one-off movies, and then there's perhaps the Blade trilogy, but after Trinity, who the hell is counting that? Blade is a fantastic duology as far as I'm concerned. One of the only true superhero trilogies is the Dark Knight trilogy. Partly why the Dark Knight trilogy is the quintessential superhero trilogy is because each chapter is an essential connecting chapter of one big story without frills or spin-offs. Simultaneously, each movie can be enjoyed on its own steam. It uses visuals and callbacks in a similar manner to Spider-Verse to tie everything together, like the fact that the pit in part 3 looks like the well in part 1.
Bruce, why do we fall?
That is something that Spider-Verse is doing really well. Interconnected universes are cool, and when they work well they can be really engrossing, but there is something amiss with no more intentions of a trilogy being bandied about. It does allow you to really craft something focused with the superhero in question, rather than worrying about where the integral team-up movie leaves them. Spider-Verse will be closer as a trilogy to The Dark Knight than Guardians is as a trilogy. After many years of now seeing a Spider-Man flip-flop between his own stories and team-up movies, sharing the screen with other superheroes and even other versions of himself, with no clear end in sight to his story, it's truly wondrous to be given a Spider-Man trilogy with a clear beginning and end game. We've never really had that before. Spider-Man has gone from being a character felt sidelined by some fans in favour of other superheroes sharing the marquee banner, but Spider-Verse is an epic saga as big as the Infinity War Endgame double bill, while simultaneously relying exclusively on Spider-Man lore. Sony have spent years trying to craft a cinematic universe out of the character, but the Lord and Miller-led team across just 2 films have managed to create a box office smash that feels like the kind of superhero event the MCU spent over a decade to get to. I think Spider-Verse has really gone to show that you don't need a million different team-ups and solo projects to get to the big crescendo. All it really takes are focused, character-led stakes and a clear plan from A to B. The radioactive spider glitching and coming from another universe just felt like a cool detail in the first movie, a way to explain how it got here to bite a second would-be Spider-Man. I don't think anybody dwelled on it glitching because Miles killed it, whereas the other glitching entities in the first movie were on a ticking clock drawing all the focus.
Glitching? No. Why would you even say that?
Now that's all been readjusted in the coolest way. Now the very fact that Miles was bitten by a variant radioactive spider provides us with all of the narrative thrust to propel the Spider Society's mission and Miles' character. Miguel, much like the architect, has a message for our chosen one. He's not really a chosen one at all.
Bullshit.
It's a meta-commentary on people in real life constantly trying to make the Miles Spider-Man seem illegitimate, and engages with the idea of a single entity having a unified story across multiverses, and what that really says about who they are, their free will, and what makes them special. No Way Home is fun, but I don't think it explores what it means to be 3 guys with different faces all drawn to the same path, with as much nuance and depth as Spider-Verse has. Spider-Man 2099 is the perfect Spider-Man to be the villain in this context because he's a Spider-Man that wasn't even bitten and can't even stick to walls. His powers, look and history make him far more of an outlier than any Miles variant, so it's ironic that this is the Spider who is trying to lay down so many rules. This then feeds into the final twist of the movie. Miles inadvertently travels to the Earth his spider came from and comes face to face with the Miles who was supposed to be bitten. This Miles, working with his Uncle Aaron, is that universe's Prowler. I was wondering what with all these Spider-Men if Miles would meet another Miles, and it turned out to indeed happen in the series, but in the most jaw-dropping way possible at the most interesting time possible in the story. For Miles to learn that the spider was meant for this guy, but because he never became Spider-Man he became the Prowler instead, is going to lead to some juicy exchanges in the next movie. Even this, the final turn of the second movie, was set up all the way back in Spider-Verse 1. When Peter Parker senses Miles during the first Collider sequence, Miles' background goes from yep, Prowler colours to Spidey colours. What a fantastic way of seeding that in. This whole deal with the variant radioactive spider was something that didn't seem so important in the first movie, but it has now transformed everything. All of these connective strands make Into the Spider-Verse feel like it was made back to back with these sequels. Usually you can tell when franchises are making things up as they go, even if they stick the landing. Like, is the Thanos in 2012's The Avengers and 2014's Guardians the same one in 2018's Infinity War? No. He is in terms of continuity, but do they have any real synergy? Come on, the way Guardians Thanos talks and acts feels like a paper-thin approximation of the Thanos we would later meet in Infinity War, and that's because you can tell no one knew what they were going to do with him over the course of the Infinity Saga. Spot, on the other hand, that feels absolutely seamless. It helps that his face is completely covered upon gaining his powers, meaning you could have made him just about anyone in the first movie, but choosing to make him the guy that gets bageled really is a masterstroke.
Wait ring, just like I told you.
Again, like with the radioactive spider or Miles' colours, the sequel takes so many different little moments and makes them hold so much more weight from the first movie. I love the decision to include Spot. Jason Schwartzman was hilarious in the role, and I always love the idea of baking a villain's Z-list status into the plot. Like El Muerto, nobody cares about that character, so why not make that the story of the movie? What if El Muerto is a petty crook who just so happens to get lucky and knock out Spider-Man exactly once, and he's been riding off those coattails ever since? But in actuality, he's a fraud, deeply scared of running into Spider-Man again, and he's not half the hard man his reputation touts. At least that way we'd have an in with the character the same way our in with Spot is that he knows he's a villain of the week. It translates to a very real human feeling of wanting to be noticed and valued. Attributing so much significance to a bagel is a neat little way of giving a nod to last year's premiere multiverse movie, and it means that the canon event, Jeff's Doomsday, the crescendo to this trilogy, all starts with a moment of comedy an hour into the story. Wonderful. Guardians of the Galaxy is more of an MCU trilogy than most. All three movies tie together nicely. Guardians 1 and 2 feels just as connected and well thought out as the Spider-Verse movies. Everything with Peter's dad, his relationship to Yondu, that all feels well teased watching them back to back. And then much like in Spider-Verse, the interpersonal relationships flow really well.
I don't know what Cheers is!
But by the time we get to part 3, so much has happened in between in other movies that it becomes a messy trilogy plus, in Gunn's own words. Don't get me wrong, I liked a lot of Guardians 3, and all of my problems with it don't stem from Gunn. All of the things I didn't enjoy are a result of a cinematic universe buckling under the weight of so many interconnected events and time jumps. The Guardians' adventures in between time caused Gunn so many issues, some minor and some major. He didn't want Star-Lord's mask to come back after its destruction in Volume 2, and recently tweeted that it was somehow restored for Infinity War. Thor ended up with the Guardians, but pure luck meant Gunn didn't end up having to deal with that. The endgame time jump meant that Volume 3 takes place a whopping 12 years after the second one, meaning Adam Warlock, the Sovereign, and the High Evolutionary couldn't have been that bothered about catching Rocket after the post-credit scene of Part 2. It only makes sense as a sequel that takes place shortly after Volume 2, right? Gunn didn't want Star-Lord to lose his temper on Thanos, and ends up having to make a coy reference to it in Volume 3 before swiftly moving on.
That's some freaking Infinity Stone scientist.
The biggest piece of the puzzle is Gamora, who dies and is then replaced with a 2014 duplicate, who is essentially a brand new character dropped into the concluding part of a trilogy. Imagine if Jim Gordon got replaced with an alternate past version of himself in Rises, and everyone was just expected to get on with it. Tonal issues aside, that would feel like a real cop-out. I don't think Peter's arc of moving on is something that needed 2014 Gamora to work. The character could have ended up in exactly the same place without this messy reskin of a beloved character. Because Guardians 1 and 2 are so divorced from the rest of the MCU, it makes the Guardians harder to reconcile as a trilogy than anything else. Iron Man, Cap and Holland Spidey have their movies referred to as trilogies, but from the word go everyone knew that they would just be middle parts in one bigger story, so no one really looks for that connective tissue in the same way. But Gunn actively trying to craft a trilogy here is hampered by that same fact. What's insane is that Spider-Verse manages to remain a tightly wound trio of stories with MCU references too.
Don't even get me started on Doctor Strange and the little nerd back on Earth 1999.
We see Mrs. Chen, Toby, Andrew, and even a variant of Donald Glover's Aaron Davis.
I like red.
The difference is that having Star-Lord rattle off a bunch of hugely significant events for Gamora in an elevator detracts from the story, whereas Miguel using Spider-Man canon to illustrate his point only enhances what he is trying to say. I think the only thing I don't love about the crossovers is having the characters stay live action when interacting with animated characters. I kind of always thought if they went into live action they would look like us. We only see them hyper stylized through the lens of that universe. Otherwise it's all going a bit Roger Rabbit. I know animated characters keep their designs when crossing into other universes, but the jump to live action is very, very different, and I think that's exactly the point for me where it starts to get messy. Honestly, just have Shameik, Jake and Hayley jump into a live action segment in the next movie. Sure, they're not the right ages for these characters, but I think you could dress them up enough to evoke them, and nobody seemed to care about 40-year-old Padawan Hayden Christensen, so who cares now? I think it would be fun to see all their respective looks in live action just for a moment, and they could fight alongside the live action Spider-Verse. The series has constructed itself in such a way that you could totally do this and have a brief No Way Home crossover without making it so that you'd be lost without the context of the other movies. It would still behave like a trilogy, even if you'd never seen Spider-Man 2 or No Way Home or The Amazing Spider-Man 2. Wow, I wonder what that person's life is like having been spared that movie. Must be really nice. Guardians Volume 3 and Spider-Verse are very entertaining superhero movies, and both have emotional elements and exciting moments fans will be talking about for years to come. But I think one goes to show just how freeing it can be to do your own thing, rather than having other movies telling them how their story is supposed to go. I think Gunn stuck the landing, but I do wonder what we would have gotten had his trilogy been a true trilogy, and not a trilogy plus. Whilst I enjoyed the Guardians' presence in Infinity War and Endgame, there's no denying their path has been a little convoluted. Miles and his fellow Spider variants have been part of an intricate web, one that hasn't buckled under the weight of the multiverse or having to service too much with too little time. I'm very excited to see how the story is wrapped up in part 3, and I think we'll finally have another true superhero trilogy. A big thank you to my full fat tier patron, Dr. Chike, and Nathan Shaw. If you'd like to donate money to my Patreon, you can find me at patreon.com/fullfatvideos. If you'd like to find me on Instagram, you can find me at full_fat_videos. And if you'd like to find me on Twitter, you can find me at fullfatvideos.